The rain started as a drizzle that morning, barely noticeable as I hurried to catch the 8:15 bus to work. By midday, it had transformed into sheets of water that pounded against the office windows, creating a hypnotic rhythm that made focusing on spreadsheets nearly impossible. I found myself staring out at the gray sky more often than at my computer screen, wondering if the storm would pass before the workday ended. It didn't. If anything, the downpour intensified, and I silently thanked my morning self for checking the weather forecast and tucking my trusty black umbrella into my bag. I always came prepared, unlike him. Kai works 3 cubicles down from mine in the marketing department. He's been there for about 8 months now, having transferred from the company's West Coast office. With his easy smile and tendency to bring homemade cookies to team meetings, he quickly became everyone's favorite colleague. Everyone, including me, though I tried to maintain a professional distance. It wasn't easy, especially when he'd lean against my desk during lunch breaks, asking questions about the city with genuine curiosity in his warm brown eyes. The first time I noticed his habit of forgetting his umbrella was back in March, during an unexpected spring shower. We'd both stayed late to finish a presentation, and as we walked toward the exit, I opened my umbrella while he patted his pockets with growing dismay. "I could have sworn I brought it today," he said, looking up at the dark clouds as if personally betrayed. I offered to share mine, but he insisted on making a run for it to the subway station 2 blocks away. The next day, he arrived with slightly damp hair and a sheepish smile, admitting he'd forgotten his umbrella again that morning. It became something of a running joke between us. Kai would forget his umbrella with such consistency that I started to wonder if it was deliberate. April showers, summer storms, autumn drizzles, the pattern held. Sometimes he'd borrow one from the lost and found collection near reception, returning it the next day only to forget his own again a week later. I teased him about it, and he took it good-naturedly, claiming that growing up in Southern California hadn't prepared him for a life of rain readiness. Today was no different. As the office began to empty at 5 o'clock, I saw Kai staring out the window with that familiar look of realization. He caught my eye across the room and gave me a helpless shrug that made me laugh despite myself. "Let me guess," I called over, packing up my laptop. "You forgot your umbrella again?" He pressed his hands together in a pleading gesture that was both ridiculous and endearing. "The forecast said 30% chance of rain this morning. That's basically saying it won't rain at all." I shook my head, trying to look exasperated but failing miserably. 30% is still almost a 1 in 3 chance, you know. I pulled my umbrella from my bag, waving it like evidence in a courtroom. This is why I always come prepared. We walked to the elevator together, joined by a few other colleagues heading home. Someone mentioned the flash flood warnings for low-lying areas, and conversation turned to commute routes and weekend plans despite the weather. When we reached the lobby, people dispersed quickly, racing to nearby parking garages or huddling under the building's awning while ordering rideshares. Kai and I lingered, watching the rain bounce off the pavement. "So," he said, turning to me with that smile that always made something flutter in my chest, "any chance your umbrella policy includes insurance for forgetful coworkers?" I pretended to consider it seriously. "Well, the premium would be quite high given your history of umbrella negligence." The laugh this earned from him made me feel unreasonably pleased with myself. But I suppose I could make an exception, just this once. Again, the truth was, I'd made this exception at least 5 times over the past few months. Each time, we'd walk huddled together under my not quite large enough umbrella, shoulders brushing, conversations flowing more easily than they did in the fluorescent-lit office. Each time, I'd tell myself it was just a friendly gesture, nothing more. Each time, I'd spend the evening replaying our conversations, wondering if I was reading too much into the way his eyes lingered on mine when we said goodbye. I opened my umbrella and stepped out into the rain, Kai quickly joining me beneath its shelter. Immediately, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of us, cocooned in a small dry circle amid the downpour. His shoulder pressed against mine by necessity. My umbrella was designed for one person, or perhaps 1.5 at most. I could smell his cologne, something with notes of cedar and bergamot, subtle but distinctive. "Which way are you headed?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. We'd walked to the same subway station enough times that our route was established, but the question was part of our ritual. "Uptown Q train," he replied, matching his pace to mine as we navigated around puddles. You? Same, I said, adjusting my grip on the umbrella handle as a gust of wind threatened to turn it inside out. Though I'm tempted to wait it out at that cafe on the corner. This rain is brutal. Kai's hand came up to steady the umbrella, his fingers briefly overlapping with mine on the handle. I wouldn't say no to coffee, he said. My socks are already soaked, and we've only gone half a block. I glanced down and saw that he was right. His canvas sneakers were darkened with water, completely impractical for the weather. Those shoes are definitely not rain-approved, I commented. Did you also miss the part of adulting class where they teach you about appropriate footwear? He laughed, the sound warming me despite the chill in the air. I'll have you know these are very fashionable in any weather. Besides, I left my galoshes back in 1985 where they belong. We decided to brave the rain and continue to the subway, partly because the cafe looked packed with others escaping the downpour, and partly because, though neither of us said it, extending our walk meant extending our time together. The city looked different in the rain, softened somehow. Street lights reflected in puddles, creating mirror worlds beneath our feet. Car headlights cut through the gray haze, and the usual cacophony of urban noise was muffled by the steady drumming of water on my umbrella. As we walked, conversation flowed naturally from work to weekend plans to the new restaurant that had opened nearby. Kai told me about his sister's upcoming visit, how he was nervous about showing her around a city he was still learning himself. I shared stories about my favorite hidden spots, places tourists never find but that capture the real essence of the city. When he mentioned wanting to visit the botanical gardens, I found myself almost offering to take him there, catching the words just before they escaped. Let me explain why these moments matter so much. These ordinary interactions, walking through rain-soaked streets with someone, they're the spaces where real connection happens, away from the performative nature of dating apps or the structured environment of the workplace. There's an honesty that emerges when you're simply existing alongside someone, navigating puddles, and sharing observations about the world around you. The physical closeness necessitated by the umbrella creates an intimacy that can't be manufactured, shoulders touching not by choice but by circumstance, yet somehow feeling entirely right. We passed a flower shop with buckets of blooms protected under an awning, their colors especially vibrant against the gray backdrop of the rainy day. Kai slowed, looking at an arrangement of yellow and purple flowers. My mom would love those, he said, a touch of homesickness in his voice. She has this garden that's basically a riot of color. Says it helps balance out my dad, who thinks beige is too exciting. I laughed, trying to imagine growing up in a household so different from my minimalist apartment. Do you miss it? California, I mean. He considered this, his shoulder warm against mine as we stood there, rain creating a private soundtrack around us. Parts of it, he finally said. The weather, obviously. Family. The pace was different, slower, more spread out. But there's something about this city that gets under your skin in the best way. It's alive in a way nowhere else is. When he looked at me then, I wondered if he was really talking about the city at all. There was something in his expression I couldn't quite read, a question or possibility hanging between us, as tangible as the rain. The moment stretched, neither of us looking away, until a taxi splashed through a puddle nearby, nearly soaking us and breaking whatever spell had momentarily formed. We continued walking, crossing streets and navigating around other pedestrians with the synchronized movements of people accustomed to sharing space. At one point, a gust of wind nearly turned my umbrella inside out, and Kai's hand quickly covered mine on the handle to help steady it. He didn't move his hand away immediately afterward, and I didn't ask him to. Instead, we walked like that for a block, hands overlapped, neither acknowledging this new development explicitly. The rain created a strange sort of privacy, isolating us in a bubble of shared experience. People hurried past with their heads down, focused only on reaching their destinations. No one looked twice at two people sharing an umbrella, standing perhaps closer than strictly necessary. In this anonymous city of millions, we were temporarily invisible together, free to exist in a moment that felt increasingly significant with each step. Can I ask you something? Kai said as we waited for a traffic light to change. Something that might be a little weird? My heart rate picked up, mind racing through possibilities. Sure, I said, aiming for casualness despite the sudden dryness in my throat. Do you think I actually keep forgetting my umbrella? Or do you think maybe there's another reason? The directness of the question caught me off guard. I'd wondered this myself, especially on days when the forecast had been clear about rain. But hearing him say it aloud made the possibility real in a way my private speculations hadn't. I've wondered, I admitted, watching the raindrops rather than meeting his eyes. Especially since you've lived here almost a year now, and most people adapt to the weather patterns eventually. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I have 3 umbrellas at home. One by the door, one in my desk drawer, and a tiny one in my gym bag. Just so you know. The implications of this confession hung between us, neither of us immediately addressing what it meant. The light changed, and we crossed the street in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like the necessary pause before a significant shift, the breath before words that change everything. When we reached the entrance to the subway station, we stopped, protected from the rain by the overhang. Normally, this would be where we parted ways, me continuing to the downtown platform, him to the uptown. But today, neither of us moved to leave. Why? I finally asked, closing my umbrella and shaking off the excess water. Why pretend to forget? Kai ran a hand through his slightly damp hair, looking both nervous and determined. Because those walks are the highlight of my day. Because I like the person I am when I'm with you. More observant, more present. Because I've been trying to find the courage to ask you out properly for months, but something always holds me back. Fear of rejection, fear of making things awkward at work, fear that I'm misreading signals. His honesty was disarming, and I found myself smiling despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. That's a lot of fear for someone brave enough to orchestrate elaborate umbrella-forgetting schemes. He laughed, the tension visibly easing from his shoulders. Well, when you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous. But the question still stands, even if the delivery method was unconventional. Around us, commuters rushed past, shaking off umbrellas and checking phones, oblivious to the moment unfolding between us. The rain continued to fall, creating a steady backdrop to a conversation that felt both inevitable and surprising. I think, I said carefully, that I've been looking forward to rainy days more than I should. And I think that probably says something important. His smile then was worth every damp sock and rainy commute we'd shared. So if I were to ask you to dinner, somewhere indoors, with no umbrellas required, what would you say? I'd say yes, I replied, surprising myself with how easy the answer came. Though I might miss our walks. We could still have those, he suggested. Rain or shine. Though I might actually bring my own umbrella sometimes, now that my master plan has succeeded. As we stood there, making plans for dinner the following evening, I realized something about connections between people. Sometimes they build slowly, through small moments of shared experience, shoulders touching under an umbrella, conversations that meander like our path through rainy streets, the gradual accumulation of knowledge about another person until one day, you realize they've become important to you in ways you never anticipated. We eventually parted ways, heading to our respective platforms with promises to text later. As I waited for my train, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of all those forgotten umbrellas, the elaborate but endearing ruse that had ultimately led us here. Tomorrow would bring a proper date, with all the excitement and nervousness that entailed. But there was something special about the journey that had brought us to this point, something I wouldn't trade for the most perfectly planned romantic gesture. Sometimes the most meaningful connections start not with grand declarations or perfect circumstances, but with small moments of shared inconvenience that gradually transform into something beautiful. Sometimes it takes a little rain to reveal what's been there all along, waiting to bloom when the conditions are just right. And sometimes, just sometimes, forgetting an umbrella might be the most rememberable thing you ever do. Total_char_count, 13,547.